Earlier today, I recorded the third post-election pendulum check that I am now releasing to all of you. And I am posting this here as like a little bit of a preface or preamble because when I did that video, I am pretty sure I had a full-on psychic attack. I almost lost my ability to speak. I went into a severe migraine as I was doing that recording. I had full body sweats going on. And so that recording was very challenging for me to do. Now, there was so much more that I wanted to say. There were so many more layers in that video that I wanted to include. And the challenge for me is I only recorded the bare bones basics. Frankly, I think I was lucky to get it out, and I think I will be lucky to get it out and put it on the internet. So as you watch this recording, please know that I recorded it under a severe amount of duress. It's a video that's been very hard for me to make. It has taken me days to work through the information because the information is so disturbing. Because the information I recorded is so basic, you're going to need to fill in the blanks. There were other psychic hits and other things that I learned as I put this together. But for all intents and purposes, I need to get the information out first, and then we can work with a conversation from there. So here's the video. Take it for what it's worth, and I would love to hear your commentary on it. So I am back with this next post-election pendulum check for the 2024 into 2025 presidential election with Kamala Harris and Trump. For the record, this video is for entertainment purposes only. Number two, I encourage you to use your own discernment in watching this video. Number three, if you also use a pendulum, I encourage you to pendulum check some of the things that I'm working with here and see what results you come up with as well. Also, I am recording this on Wednesday, November the 27th, 2024, about 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And last, there is a portion of this pendulum check that I do want to give a trigger warning on. Some of the information that I will be going over will be disturbing. I will say that it took a while for me to move through this, just for me to absorb the information that I was taking in myself. This was not an easy pendulum check to do, but I do believe it is important for us as the voting American public and the tax-paying American public. We need to know this information. So let's go ahead and get started with just the initial pendulum check on the status of what's going on. And for those of you joining for the first time, when I pendulum check, my midpoint is directly up and down, the right being a no, the left being a yes. So in this check, what I found out is that Trump is still sitting on a no. He does not make it into office. Harris is no longer the solid yes that she was the last time. It has come off of that a little bit. And then I just had this feeling, for kicks and grins, I threw in other. And what was very interesting is my pendulum swung around left several times until it landed in the no position, which tells me there may be something going on with a third-party person here. So for this next piece of information, we're going to go over the power structure in the United States in reflection with the presidency, and we're going to be reviewing the power structure that we typically do not see. So the first part of this that I want to share with you is that usually what we see when we're doing a presidential election is we usually see a left-wing or Democratic presidential candidate come to light, and then a right-wing or a Republican candidate come to light, and then some third-party candidates show up, and then the media goes ahead and gives all the attention to these two candidates. This is what we see. Now, for a long time, we've known that there are powers behind the scenes that affect and run things. And more recently, I had someone remind me, they're like, yeah, Dana, it's the left wing of the bird and the right wing of the bird. And so how I've got this looping around, those are supposed to be wings. That's my art. As I remove this paper, this information that I reveal might be disturbing for some of you, so I just want to give that trigger warning again. So this is the information that I wanted to show to you, because the last time I got done with the last pendulum check, I really had that feeling of like, we really need to know what's going on with the power structures behind the United States presidency. And it took me a while to, like, I've got it all tabulated here and it's pretty clean, but I got to tell you folks, this took me about 5 or 6 tries, many days thinking about it, going back, pendulum checking. So let me show you what you are looking at here. When we take a look at the 2 candidates and then the power structure behind them, basically the bird, I would say it is not a singular bird. It is a constant power struggle between these entities as far as who lands in office. Now, what I did is I went through and I did countries. What countries are involved, what entities are involved, and what individuals are involved. And I brought in the American public as well, and we will get to the sex trafficking piece here. So I got these all lined up, and I would sketch out some, and then I would walk away from it, and I go, oh, there's those other ones, and I would add them in, and I do the pendulum check. And so this is the sketch that I've got going now. And when I pendulum checked it out, when I pendulum checked it out, to me, the most disturbing part of it is that the sex trafficking rings or the sex trafficking cartel has the most power as far as how the United States presidency gets created. Now, if you do not understand what sex trafficking rings are, the underground of this, the underbelly, and how it's connected into the United States military, and how it's connected into our police force, and how it's connected into Child Protective Services, you need to go do your research and learn the blackmail rings that are connected in here with this entire system. I'm not going to spend any time on that. I'm giving you enough of a hint. But to me, when I did this entire pendulum check on the power system, the power grid behind the United States presidency, I was so shocked by this that I sat and cried for a while. I mean, and I had to walk away from it because it was just so disturbing. So then who is the number 2? Well, very interesting. The number 2 overall is China, but not just China, but the uber wealthy individuals connected into China and the United States. The number 3 shocker for me as far as the power structure is the pharmaceutical industry. I thought for sure it would be the industrial military complex, but the pharmaceutical industry and the pharmaceutical lobby is one of the most powerful, influential aspects into the United States presidency. And I also should say, when I put this together, the pendulum check is checking for power, money, and influence. It's those 3 things, okay? Fourth in line, not a surprise, industrial military complex. Then we've got the banking cartel that's connected into the corporatocracy. Now, most of us think, when we think about the power behind the presidency, we think of these 2 things, right? And how these 2 things are connected in, the banking cartel and the corporatocracy. It is so much larger than that. And all of these power structures, they have relationships with one another. I think I could probably spend a whole pendulum check just doing that. All right, number 6, interesting, Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett has a hell of a lot of influence, and I don't think negative. I think he is probably one of the more positive or constructive people in this whole power grid going on. Now, when we begin to get into this array of like 6, like in this middle ground, I think these all could jockey for different positions. Then, of course, we've got the oil cartel. Israel, I was surprised that Israel was this far down on the list. I thought Israel and IPAC would actually be higher. 9, this group of people who were intrinsically involved, directly involved with the presidential election this year, Musk, Thiel, and Bezos. I got hits that Thiel is somewhat of Musk's handler, and Bezos is so much more involved than we can imagine at this point. Then, of course, the Koch brothers, Saudi Arabia. Now, Saudi Arabia would not be on this list if it weren't for Trump. I included the drug cartels, like, the hardcore drug cartels. They do play a role. Then I got real curious. I was like, well, if these are the power players, how powerful is the collective American public? Folks, as a collective, we are about 16 on this list. So that tells you where our power play is going on right now. And then I did not do direct pendulum checks to find out in this grouping who was backing Harris and who was backing Trump, but I did do a pendulum check to find out how many in this grouping were backing Harris, and it's about 4. And I also pendulum checked to find out from a standard or an average perspective how many of these power players back at American presidents, and on average it's usually 4 to 5. Trump is topping out at 10. He's got about 10 entities backing him. And this right here makes a case for why he was not allowed to lose, why he couldn't lose, because he was bought off by too many of these power players. The one last piece of this that I do want to throw in here, it did occur to me, I did not include the auto industry, and I suspect the auto industry is also among the power players here. Now, let's go ahead and move on to a timeline. I want to show you this timeline because after I pendulum checked the last time and found out that the 1960 John F. Kennedy presidential election was really truly the last free, fair American election that we had, I got real curious and I wanted to find out a little bit more in depth what that was looking like with the power structure. And so I spent some time going over the years of the presidential election, and I did this pendulum check before I had the full picture here, but so I probably need to update this, but this will just give you an idea. So the industrial military complex started dabbling in being an influencer in the presidential election right around World War I, and that would make sense. And then it was right around World War II that influence became stronger, and then it was solid from 1960 on. The other entity that is a part of this was the oil cartel, and the oil cartel started in really solidly right during World War II. So we've got the oil cartel and the industrial military complex really coming in strong in 1960. Where did the banking cartel begin to show up? And that was right at 1960. So it becomes really clear that the banking cartel and the oil cartel and the industrial military complex really took off as far as influencing heavily the American election system. And it's no wonder that John F. Kennedy was assassinated, because I could just see him not playing, and so he was assassinated. They got rid of him. And so every presidential election since has been held to this power structure and the growing power structure. You can see Russia came in 2000. Warren Buffett has had a lot of influence in the presidential elections. And am I missing? Oh, and China. China came in 1992. So, like I said, I probably need to update this considering the layers that I was able to figure out here. But this will just give you an idea of how much the power structure, the further we go, how much the power structure of the American presidency is affected by this consortium of power entities before we are even taken into account. Okay, and then moving on, I wanted to find out who was actually physically directly involved in affecting our electoral system this year, especially the presidency directly. These were the positive hits that came back that the pendulum gave: China, Russia and Putin, Musk, Thiel, Bezos, and Trump. Really no surprises there. Okay, and then moving on, I wanted to check in again with legal action. If Harris was doing a recount and taking legal action with this election, and what, if anything, is the U.S. federal government doing? And the pendulum check came back and said a positive yes, Harris is taking action. And so is the federal government. And first, when I asked, I didn't put the word presidency, and it came back at a 45-degree angle. When I added the word presidency, it came back as a solid yes. Now, is the federal government helping Harris with her legal work? And that came back as a no, and that would make sense. But is Harris's work, is Harris also providing information and help to the U.S. federal government in this endeavor? And it came back as a solid yes. Wanted to find out, is all the evidence and legal prep ready to go? For Harris, that came back as a solid yes. For the federal government, that came back as a partial. And then I wanted to find out, what is holding this thing up? Why haven't we heard anything? And I asked, is it a timing issue? That's a yes. Do they need more evidence? Somewhat. Is this a dynamic thing? No. Is this another thing? No. So we're basically down to timing and a little bit more evidence. And then after looking at that whole power dynamic thing, I wanted to find out, like, is this legal action process, is it legit? You know, is it a ruse? And the pendulum basically said this legal action process that Harris and the federal government is doing, it is legitimate, and are behind the scenes power players involved. I got a yes on that as well. So then I wanted to know, so, like, are we being messed with again? Is this a ruse? Or is this a real deal? And the pendulum came back and said, no, it's not a ruse. Like, this legal action really is the real deal. Now, I wanted to find out if this legal action is going to affect that whole power consortium behind the presidency. And the pendulum basically was saying is that power consortium won't necessarily be revealed, and it won't necessarily be revealed fully, but it will begin to unravel it. And so what is happening with the whole presidential election this year has to do with the beginning of that power consortium beginning to unravel. And what Spirit Team told me through the whole thing is this power conglomerate right here is like the pendulum has swung, no pun intended, but the pendulum has swung way too far out of alignment. And so this has gotten so big, so unwieldy, it can do nothing but fall apart at this point. And that's what we potentially will begin to see. Now, again, when I ask about specific timing, Spirit Team is not letting me reveal that. All they will say is December 2024.